This is Alan Abrone with ARA Self-Empowerment Podcast. Have a hot topic on today. Hope you reach out to your friends, frenemies, strangers. Share this content with as many as you can. Feel free to go over to YouTube and like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel, ARA Self-Empowerment. And you will see the green consonant, African consonant, as our logo. Let me say this, and I always have to begin with this. Shouldn't have to, but I have to. No, we're not anti-government. We're not anti-USA. We're not anti the United States of America. Anti-European American, Latino American, Hispanic American, or any racial group. We're not anti. Okay, we are pro-humanity, pro-constitution, pro-preamble, obviously pro-God Almighty. And we believe in our Lord Savior, Jesus Christ. And so this podcast, as with ARA Self-Empowerment, is all about community impact over profit. We're all about how can we impact the community? How can we help society? How can we say things that may spark conversation? And so today's podcast is concerning the black label versus the label African American and reparations throughout the United States of America, or America, however you want to call it, address it. And so where do I start? I desire to start with the black label. And with all things, as being young, when I was young, most of the time we repeated what we heard. We heard black, I'm black. Hey, I'm black. That's what I heard. Just like so many people repeat the word nigga. People say, what's up, my nigga? What up, nigga? And now you have Hispanics, Latinos saying the word nigga, European Americans saying the word nigga, and they've given it its own meaning, saying that it means homie. And one of the biggest things that hurt the African American community was hip hop, the so-called hip hop culture. If we were already hurt and devastated by the Confederacy and the Confederate States of America. I bring up the Confederate States because the Confederate States are a group of people who came together and made it known how they felt within the United States of America and decided to form their own union, confederacy rather, not union, confederacy, saying that the natural order was the European race over the African race. And they call us the Negro race. And so many times you have now people going about in revisionist history. And I heard a man say something the other day to me, which was very profound. He said he doesn't see a lot of racism in a particular county, and it was Johnson County. He was bringing up Johnson County and bringing up Cleveland, Texas. He said that he didn't see a lot of racism. I wanted to disagree, but then after I thought about it, I said it makes a lot of sense. He said, what I see is a lot of ignorance. That's true. And Cleveland, Texas and Johnson County is a microcosm of half of the United States of America, where half is rural and half is urban. And whether you're in the urban or you're in the rural area, in certain topics or positions, you see a lot of ignorance. Even if it's in the urban areas, there will be a lot of ignorance when it comes to gang activity. Hear people saying check in my neighborhood and stuff like that. So it's a lot of ignorance. It's not so much as hate when you look at urban activity. You see people say, well, African Americans hate each other, or quote unquote black people hate each other. They're more violent with one another. Well, I think it's ignorance. That's true. Most people are not racist. They're ignorant racists. Ignorant. They're not, what I mean by that, We're all racist to a certain degree because we know something about races, but most are ignorant racists. So you're not a racist that has education on races, so you're ignorant. And then there are those who are into racism that attempts to put races in certain categories and caste systems. And so when the term black came about, I understand people's reflection of meaning. When they saw Africans, they attributed their dark pigmentation as meaning black. But we all know that black is the back of this phone. That's black. And as you look at this phone, you can look at my pigmentation. They're not the same. So I'm not black. I have pigmented, color in my skin. That's color, yes, but I'm not black. And so when we look at who are we as a people, whether it's African American, European Americans, we come from a continent, and whether somebody desired to name that continent or not, however they decided to do it, they want to call a continent Blue Moon or whatever. The fact that you name the continent, it says this is where we came from, or our ancestors came from. So what's the big deal? Why are so many people okay with being labeled by color versus by a family name, a continent, a region, or religion? Well, I'll tell you in simple terms, because when you are comfortable with a color, it designates you in a position of superiority or inferior. And that's the whole premise behind black and white. The whole premise behind black and white was not necessarily about where you're from, because you're not from a rainbow. This was all about inferiority and superiority, because the word white, it represents purity, righteousness, clean. Okay. Now, whether you say the person is dark and that's why we did that could be so. But let's look at it this way. What color are Arabs? What color are Japanese? What color are Hispanics? What color are Indians? I'm talking about in India, not the indigenous people. But what are their colors? Have you noticed that Africans are the only people that have a color assigned to them, and the only people that don't that has a color assigned to them is Europeans, who happen to colonize the whole continent of Africa. And the most absurd thing that I've ever heard in my life is claiming that Africans sold their own into slavery. Well, let's just look at that theoretically, from a theory point. If that was true, wouldn't at least one African nation be on the level of a European nation? Just one. You can't name one. So that tells you that they were not in control of slavery. Because if Africa sold other Africans into slavery and profited as Europeans did, there will be at least one African nation in the whole continent of Africa on the level of Japan, Germany, Europe, the continent of Europe, which means Germany, France, Great Britain, Spain. There is none. And when it comes to colonization, the whole African continent was colonized, saving for Ethiopia, which was occupied briefly during World War II. Ethiopia is the only African nation to not be colonized in all of Africa. And so when you hear people saying the word black, you are black, it goes back to the beginning of time. In the beginning of time, when Adam was given the authority to name all the animals. Well, there are a group of European Americans who feel like they have the authority to name people, name everything. It's their destiny, as if they descended from God, as if almost on the level of God, that they get to name all the animals and all the people, and we are their servants. Not saying all European Americans feel this way, but far too many do. So the label black is something that they came up with. So they're saying that you are black, even though we didn't come from a rainbow. Even though when I look at this, the back of this phone, that's black. I mean, I'm not black. Come on now. And so when we start thinking about this term, black, and you have people like Smokey Robinson, I can't think of the governor, I think he's a governor in North Carolina, South Carolina. He said he's just an American. Okay. Well, if you're just an American, I say this all the time, then, and you don't want the prefix of African connected to American, then why is the word black? If we're just Americans, why are we saying about concerning black on black crime? And I've said this so often, and we're going to get to why the label black is there and why they don't want you to say African American. Well, in which is the same reason many don't want reparations, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, when you look at the word black, again, it's a color. It doesn't come from a family, name, a region, a continent, none of that. It's just a color. And colors are in coloring books or from the rainbow, etc., etc. So what's this big deal concerning black versus African American or just American? Well, here's the double bind communication in saying, oh, I'm not, if you're in America, you wasn't born in Africa. I say it again, you wasn't born in a rainbow either. So why are you saying black? Okay. So here you have people saying they're just American, but then we'll double back and come up with statistics, black on black crime. Blacks lead in this, blacks this, that, white people. And if you look at all the statistics, it's always that whites, so to speak, what they call whites, European Americans, are the best. If it comes to crime, they don't do that many crimes. If it comes to stealing, they don't steal as much. If it comes for divorce, their numbers are always good. And here's the most craziest thing about it. It's like two people having a child, and then the child does something bad, and then you say that came from your side. How do you determine that the deviant, what side the deviant behavior came from? I know you can look at a genogram and then kind of look at some of the attributes of the family and say, well, but I'm still trying to figure out, even if you took a genogram and looked at your mother was an alcoholic or what versus and the son comes an alcoholic, I'm still trying to figure out, how do you know for sure that the deviant behavior came from the mother's side versus the father's side? And with that being said, when we start speaking about black on black crime, Chicago, and blacks leading this, and we don't have a DNA test on these people, how do we know for sure that they are quote unquote black? If they have, again, Barack Obama, for example, he has a European American mother, aka white mother, an African father. If Barack Obama becomes president, was that from the mother's side? So that's the white side coming out that made him become the president? Or was it from the African side? If Barack Obama goes and commits a crime, who do you assign the crime to? To the black side? Was it a black crime? Most likely it was a black crime because they said it was the first black president. How is the first black president? He has a European American mother. So wouldn't he be a biracial or multiracial president? I'm just asking. And so here's the point I'm making. With all of the statistics of absentee fathers and whatever, how do we know if this is coming from the African American side or what we call the black side? If all these people are multiracial and biracial people, then their crimes and deviant behavior is the result of mixing and the result of multiple races, not just the African race. Wouldn't that be more feasible? It makes more sense. But see, when you say African American associates you with Africa. It associates you with the ancestry. And a lot of people are, let's just keep it 100. They are ashamed of Africa. They are ashamed. Why? For the same reason many of the African American young ladies back in the day and probably to today use bleaching cream, because they were ashamed of their skin tone. Because the media, TV, society made them feel that way. And so if somebody said that you were European, nobody's embarrassed to say European American. And let's throw this out here. Look at the Jews. Nobody gives them a color. What color are the Jews, so to speak, Jew or Hebrews? Well, what really is a Hebrew? So what color are they? Purple? For royalty, which I could go with that, but I just want to know, what color are the Hebrews or the Jewish people? So what they call Jews, what color are they? And so I'm not ashamed of the pigmentation of my skin. People want to use that. They want to frame that narrative and take, just kind of redirect something to make it be something that it's not. And the reality of it is this. Most people are ashamed to say that they are descendants or their ancestors came from Africa. Most people that come from Europe have no such embarrassment. Okay. Just like I heard a young lady and that she was in school and a student told her, go pick my cotton. He knew something about history, and he said, go pick my cotton. He said this to a African-American student. Now, the African-American student has never been in slavery. You hear people say that all the time. You wasn't a slave. Okay, I was not a slave. Neither were you in the Confederate Army. So why are you running around with rebel battle flags? Why are you going to Confederate cemeteries? Why did your ancestors erect Confederate monuments on courthouse steps and grounds and all this kind of stuff? Were any of them in the Battle of Gettysburg? Or any of you guys that keeps talking about the Confederacy of flying these flags, were you in any Civil War battles? No, you wasn't. And it's amazing how they want you to stop talking about slavery and reparations and colors and races, but they won't stop talking about it. They won't. They rarely talk about things in context. It's always out of context. It's never in context. It's always out of context, which leads us to reparations. And so the whole reasons why today they don't want the word African American versus the label black, because it adds a connection to not nationalism, but actually pride. I'm not talking about the bad pride of believing a lie, the pride in believing the truth, that I did not descend from a rainbow. I did not descend from your plantation. I actually descended from heaven, who placed me in Africa, a nation where kings and queens ruled, had their own land, their own languages. And so when you uproot a people and then give them a new name like black, Negro, and nigger, and they keep that, it kind of creates a sense of ownership that we still own you because you still holding on to what we called you. And until the African American race, even though people say, well, somebody named the continent of Africa. You could have named the continent of Africa something, but that is still a continent. You associating that to a continent. But when you name somebody black that has no sense of connection to anything of a last name or a continent other than a rainbow in a coloring book, I don't see how you can't see the difference in that. Because now when you say Africa, you're basically talking about land. When you say black, you're not talking about land. You're talking about a person that we have grouped together. Versus if I say Africa, we're talking about a continent that you came from. But I leave it up to you, to you of your last name, your family, your religion. I can't give you a religion. And that's what many people are fighting against. And it's sad that many people who are African American themselves fight against this. I'm not African, I'm black. They'll call themselves a nigger before they call themselves African American. Ain't that something? They're okay with being called a nigger over an African American. That's amazing. Let's go with this reparation. You hear so many people complaining about reparations, saying that they shouldn't, there should be no reparations. Let's talk about that. But they're okay with sending millions of aid to Israel, in military aid and all type of aid, technology to Israel, and that's fine. But they colonized all of Africa. And many times when you talk about Africa, any type of aid, it's always some water and some beans and some rice, and there's some skinny looking people, and that's it. We got to give them some water. Got to send some rice and beans over there to help them. Think about that. So what's the big deal concerning reparations in America? And people say, well, we shouldn't have to pay for something that we didn't do. I never owned slaves. That's a good way to look at it. But let's look at it this way. Neither did the Africans owe America a debt. All those people who lost their life felt the same way. Why am I over here working for free? Why am I getting beat? I didn't owe anybody. I didn't do anything to y'all. I didn't do anything to the European race. However you want to put it, said somebody sold them to them. Nobody told you to buy them either. The ancestors shouldn't have bought them. You say, well, they were being sold. But did somebody make you buy them? Now you think about this. And then they try to bring up this about the Irish. The Irish indentured servants. Indentured servants were only liable to be a servant for 7 years. Then after that, they were released. There was no life slavery. And there is no comparison to what Irish and the Chinese went through compared to what Africans went through during American slavery and the Atlantic slave trade. Anybody that is trying to make that comparison is truly willfully ignorant or just straight up ignorant to the point of being a moron. Because you know good and well, or you should know, that the African slave trade, the transatlantic African slave trade, and what Africans went through for over 400 years cannot be compared to nothing in the likes of history other than what the Hebrews went through with Egypt. Okay, that's the only comparison from a world history standpoint, and the brutality of it and how long it lasted is what the Hebrews went through during the Egyptian occupation when the Egyptians held on to the Hebrews for over 400 years. Okay, and consequently, that just happened to be in Africa as well. And so when we start talking about reparations, why are so many people against reparations, but they're not against sending big money to Ukraine and sending big money over to other people, helping them, and they didn't put them through what they put African people through? Well, it takes away the stigma. See, once you pay somebody, you can't really say your ancestors worked for us. You can't even look down on people of color anymore. Why? Because you had to pay for it. And who is they? America. You had to pay for it. And a lot of people still want to see you connected to slavery. Even though you may not have been a slave specifically, the stigma is still over you as an African American or a person of color. That stigma is still on you. And people can say what they want, they still hold those views. And if they had to pay, and I'm talking about the United States of America, because the people who did it are dead and gone, but the nation that benefited is still alive. That's the United States of America. You can bring up Africa all you want about Africans, so other Africans, but there is not one African nation that is in existence that benefited from slavery, that is still existing today. The only nations that benefited from it that are in existence is France, Spain, Great Britain, and America. They are here, and that's why they're superpowers. Think about it. But when you're in denial, people are fighting against reparations. You're fighting against reparations because you want to be able to look down on African Americans. You want to do that little giggle that we once owned them. You can lie about it all you want to. You can live in denial all you want to. And to give reparations to African Americans is a healing process that they don't want healing. This is why they hold on to the Confederate images, but have a problem with you holding on to the complete image. Okay, it's okay to fly a Confederate flag. It's okay to talk about Robert E. Lee. It's okay to talk about all these different Confederate generals, Patrick Cleburne, etc., etc. But if you're going to talk about them, why don't you talk about lynching, tarring and feathering, rapes, pedophilia? Talk about all that stuff that happened. Why don't you put a picture of that up? Notice they don't want to put any pictures of the atrocities that happened. And every time you talk about the atrocities, they deflect and start talking about slavery wasn't just in America. You wasn't ever a slave. Why do you keep talking about the past? Let's move on to the future. But then when they start talking about the things that African Americans do, or if, what they call black on black crime, and you would say, well, crime is not just only in Chicago. Crime wasn't invented in Chicago. African Americans are not the only people that don't have fathers in the home. If we was to do that, they'll say, no, I'll stay on topic. You see, when we address the ancestry or what happened throughout America, they say, no, let's not do that. But when they want to address us, it's fine to go all in our history. It's always moving the goalposts with them, constantly moving the goalposts. They say we have a victim mindset. I'm talking about most African Americans when we discuss the history of slavery and racism throughout America. It's a victim mindset. But yet it's okay for them to bring up Hispanics, the border, and they're not making excuses. No victim mindset. You chanting, you will not replace us. White men are being treated, but it's not a victim mindset to do all that. And so when we start looking at the black label versus African American label and reparations, what it all boils down to is slavery. It all, just like the criminal justice system, boils down to slavery. And so when you release from the label of black, you're actually releasing from slavery, from their self-perceived superiority. You are attaching yourself to a nation, a continent, a family of true ancestry and true heritage. They don't want that. And who is they? Racists, ignorant racists. Those who are into racism, they don't want that. Okay? They want to always feel like I own you. I'm dominant over you. This is why no matter how much education you can have as an African American, it's never enough. And it's always, they don't know what they're talking about. They got that online. That was given to them. Because it's always that you are beneath them. And reparations says you didn't get away with it. You had to pay for it. Yeah, you worked my ancestors for free, but you later had to pay for it. And that is something they don't want. Because now it wasn't free anymore. You had to pay for it. Now you can no longer say they worked for free. You can no longer say that their death was in vain because they had to pay for it. Who paid for it? America. Isn't that the same premise behind the police? When the police shoot you, does the police actually pay for that? No, taxpayers pay for that money. When you get those $1 million lawsuits in, but the police, that's it. Taxpayers pay for that. And so that's the same thing. Although the taxpayer didn't do it, they still had to pay for that lawsuit or the insurance. And so America benefited from slavery. And it's still benefiting today. And so as I close this podcast, we are African Americans. Because our ancestors came from the continent of Africa. And to be frank about it, all civilization came from the continent of Africa. Lastly, reparations one day will be so, and it should be. And so you say, well, how should it be? Well, it should be, if you're an American citizen and you are African, then you should get 100% of whatever the going rate for each African American or African. Meaning, if they say that everybody that is descended from slavery, that is American citizen, will get $100. Then if you are 100% African in your DNA, then you should get $100. If you have 70% African in you and you're an American citizen, you should get $70. So based on the percentage of your DNA is what percentage of each allocation should go. And that's my 2 cents. So that means that if you out there and you do your DNA, you have 51% African and 49% European, then you get $49. Or $51 rather. You hit $51. And so I hope you have a great day. Keep tuning in to our ARA Self-Empowerment Podcast. Go over onto YouTube, ARA Self-Empowerment. Like, share, and subscribe. I hope you have a great day. Continue to support us. Go to Cash App, $ ARA Self-Empowerment, or you can go to Zelle and send a donation or whatever contribution on Zelle to ARA Self-Empowerment at gmail.com. Have a great day, and may the good Lord bless you real soon.